a couple of essays I'm going to read.
Nice.
The first one is called The Other Side. It was picked up by Autofocus Books earlier this year. Every time I look at my feed, couldn't tell you why, I find some variation on this headline. Scientists recently discovered evidence of a fourth dimension. Or it's a high-energy ghost particle in space we didn't know was out there. Some radiation spike deep in the Pacific whose cause is eluding us. My response is always, huh. For one, I know nothing about science. That's why I don't understand how the algorithm has me pegged as someone who might click on these things, but I do. For years, I lived in interior Alaska, where if 100 people are spread over 30 miles, they call it a town. Winter gets dark. You start comprehending the origins of the word, why people are scared of it. Maybe you've gotten a taste, wound up alone, on a cloudy, moonless night, far from artificial light. How'd you sleep? Darkness usually gets pegged as absence, but anyone who's experienced it at that level knows it isn't. Once in a while, I'd be forced outside to drag more firewood into the mud room. Once there, with the darkness, something would stop me, stand me up straight, a feeling. Now, it might be that without sight guiding us, one of the other senses dutifully steps up, but that doesn't explain why in those moments I found myself listening. I click on the articles because I'm getting older. Someone has to. A million wild alternatives to my life swim inside of me, but no one seems interested. Why do I care so much? In these other scenarios, variations on a variation that might have bent me this way or that. I tried Anchorage for a few winters. My joke was that I missed the warmth in the big city. Commuting half an hour to Chugiak for work. It wasn't far, but moisture in the air changed so much getting away from the ocean that at a point, the road adopted a new personality. And suddenly, accelerating and braking became things you could do. Then, heading home, the reverse happened. But where it happened, this changed every day, every hour. Once again, fucking science. I was leaving work one night. The foggy road was ice. I was going 70, just a quiet stretch of road, done it 100 times. And topping a little hill, there in my lane, was a state trooper, laying down flares, the first in a number of steps he was taking to close the lane on a shitty night. My first instinct was to brake. When that didn't work, I had, by quick calculation, 2 seconds to make a decision. If not, the trooper would fly over my windshield. The flare he was holding would burst into infinite sparks, would curl, rain, then fade, dying in the otherwise silent night. I tried pulling the wheel softly toward the other lane. Any amount of turning was dangerous at this speed, but I thought, I just have to clear him by an inch. Soon, the wheel no longer worked. Had developed a mind of its own. I spun, and on the second rotation, I realized I had passed him. The trooper stood paralyzed and dumbfounded in the light of the flare. With that worry at least laid to rest, my mind relaxed, and I was suspended. The ground dropped away. I rotated and considered the difference between how you think it's going to end and how it actually does. And more often than I want to admit, I find myself thinking hard about the alternatives of that night. I say thinking, but it's listening. Today's headline reads, "Scientists find evidence of negative time." I click. Researchers in Toronto, led by Daniela Angulo, apparently got atoms cold, really, really cold. Then decided to see what happened when they shot light through them. These scientists, man. What our stoners found was that the light actually exited the material before entering it. Huh. I've driven the height of Canada 5 times. In 2013, the girl I was sleeping with, but who months earlier told me we couldn't hang out anymore, that we were only allowed to have sex because she was on a break from her boyfriend, but they were back together, asked if I would accompany her on a 2,444-mile road trip. It was weird, so I agreed. By day 5, things were mildly erotic. I mean, we cuddled at night, but that's it. No hand jobs, no payoff. I was beginning to tire of her sad Portland music. We made it to Smithers, BC, a cool, slightly funky, yet somehow slightly lame mountain town. Google it. After 2 days without cell service, I asked, could we please stop anywhere so I could make a call? She turned into a car dealership. Seemed as good a place as any to let my family know I wasn't dead yet. I wandered the sea of overpriced red Hondas, getting my mom on the line. I knew from her voice something was wrong, really wrong. My grandfather had died. She held his hand in the hospital while it happened. I'm sorry, Tyler, she sobbed. I asked, should we try calling you? And Papa said no, that you two said goodbye the last time you spoke in person, which was true. I'm so sorry, Mom, was all I got out. I hung up, dropped to my knees. There on the pavement, I felt something, a living substance that had always been inside me, yet I never knew was there, dislodged from whatever it had been stuck to. My soul, maybe? As it moved up and eventually from the crown of my head, I felt its weight. I felt that weight exit. It flew into the air and away from the car dealership. I screamed, and the girl picked me off the ground. What was that? I think all the time. What the hell left me? Recently, an opportunity opened up. One where an idiot like me, someone who for almost 3 decades survived off mouth-breathing manual labor, was handed the keys to a cushy office job. The deal was to try it for 4 months, and if you like it and don't screw anything up, we'll slide you into that seat permanently. I'd just gotten married, with plans to have kids. It seemed the universe was finally, for once, cutting me in. I passed the test, nailed my interview, and pacing the parking lot, telling some HR stooge that yes, I accepted the offer, felt like a new future awakening. My wife and I looked at houses that night, laughed more than usual, got frisky beneath the sheets. The stars were aligning. 3 days later, our new president, one that resembles a popular corn chip, took office. 1 day afterward, I got another call from the same stooge. She told me the offer was rescinded. Do not pass go. Collect 200 fodders. But that's not the point. For those 4 months, I had the keys to Daddy's Porsche. I had a reckoning, a dying of the life I was living. I saw the opportunities afforded me in my time as a backcountry ranger, a job, the joke goes, that's paid in smiles and sunsets, laid out in my mind's eye, like pieces of an enormous puzzle. And there weren't enough pieces. There would never be. So I said goodbye and felt myself get older. Getting the news that, in fact, no new life was there, that there had never been, and probably never would be, a new dawn into which to step, felt like time reversing. I know I clicked the articles about particle theory and zoomed past other news looking like I just smelled shit. Because the other news articles have answers, describe the tracks we're on, climate change, war, hair loss, like they're preordained, as if we're all car wrecks due to a birth year lottery destined to be witnessed. The masses want to shine a light on everything, it seems. They can't get enough answers. While me, I vote for darkness, more confusion, more what-ifs. What flew out of my head in that parking lot? What I lost, it wasn't my grandfather. It was the darkness he and I had always had in front of us, the possibilities. Yesterday, I found an old 10-speed on the side of the road. It had a sign that read, free, yes, seriously. I looked back and forth like someone might catch me, then picked it up. Using its only good tire, I limped it home. It was rusted, looked as if the back half spent perhaps decades buried in a riverbed. But something about it being likely as old as me made me cut it some slack. I grabbed my socket gun, a hex set, began dismantling it. I poured vinegar in a plastic container. I plopped the tiny metal parts in, watching them fizz, wondering what stories were getting erased. The day was beautiful, the first in each year that feels like a freebie. I leaned back against the porch seat, absorbing the breeze's comforting blow. I looked at my phone. Scientists pull back the veil on the universe. Huh, I thought. It's easy to believe there's life on the other side of a wall, but we can't see it. But it's there, all the same, with as much depth, with the same number of stories and what-ifs. I drifted on the day's lightness. I allowed my mind to consider, what if I had stayed with that partner, or moved to Asia instead of Hawaii? What would have happened? Where would I be? I saw those lives, watched the light exiting before it ever reached them. My wife interrupted, said I was needed, that apparently the shower drain was not draining, and this was my job, to battle the sludge and hair ruining our existence for the moment. And if I was lucky, I might get a kiss from the deal. I stood, brushed the chain rust from my shorts, said, "Of course, my love." I looked at the bike, now in more pieces than what I'd brought home. Now one more in a list of things time will decide whether I ever get back around to. And I can read another one, and that was pretty long too. It's whatever.
Go ahead.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah, I'll do one more. This one's called Locating. Farewell Transmission. Picked this one up earlier this year. I remember almost nothing of the 2007 Werner Herzog documentary, Encounters at the End of the World, but I remember this. Is there such a thing as insanity amongst penguins? Whether Herzog's hyperbolic nature made him ask, or he was simply bored to tears talking to a penguin scientist, the scene that follows haunted me. The scientist, after a long pause, where he deftly skirts revealing he thinks Herzog is a wacko, answers, "Well, they do get disoriented." With morose Catholic hymns as soundtrack, the camera focuses on a penguin turning away from everything it's ever known, becoming horrifyingly small as it moves further and farther into the vast inland of Antarctica. Disoriented, I thought. Better not contract that. Herzog's voiceover continues. Dr. Ainley explained that even if he caught him and brought him back to the colony, he would immediately head right back for the mountains. But why? As a kid, now too, when I was in a car, I played a game. As scenery whirred past, I slung an imaginary ball out into it. My mind was magnetically wed to the ball, and the whole game was having its sail, avoiding objects speeding past, then return like a boomerang, again avoiding what I was unable to see or predict when I threw it. Equally spaced objects, like electric poles or fence posts, made the game impulsive and deeply rewarding. I played for hours, on road trips, going back and forth to the store. It's what I did. But why? Growing up, I often heard about a camping trip when I was 2, how in the shortest time possible, with the adults' attention elsewhere, I wandered off and fell in a river. My grandmother dove in the 3-foot water and saved me. She'd bring it up sometimes at family events, turning the room silent. Everyone focused inward as they replayed that terrible memory. But the thing is, I didn't remember it. Aside from what felt like an irrational fear of water I eventually got over, it wasn't a part of my identity the way it was for my family. Instead, my trauma blossomed at Walmart. I must have been about 5. After getting distracted while deciding which VHS to convince my mom to buy, I finally held out a movie in front of me and ran where I thought she was, but she wasn't there, so I cried. And eventually a worker called her name on the speaker while I choked on air and salty boogers. I recalled this often, feeling the emotions as if they were fresh, until college, where, in an intro to psych course, I learned tons of people experienced the same thing, except it never happened. The professor said researchers convinced gaggles of people into believing a false memory. Google lost in the mall technique. It's fucked up. I called my mom. Did she remember? The movie, the crying, her name announced throughout the store, the embarrassment, the fear. No, she didn't. But we kept talking, and just as the researchers would have predicted, she started to doubt herself. The handrails of her memory turned soft and gooey. It could have happened, she said. I felt unmoored. The bedrock of my identity drifted. If anyone had recorded my face at that moment, I would have looked exactly like that penguin the moment before it set off. One of my favorite pastimes is wishing I'd become something I'm currently not while I was still young. I should have been a mechanic, I think, a police officer, lawyer. Now that I'm almost 40, it's easy to know my tics and proclivities. I can feel the happiness these jobs would have brought seeping through the sheen of disappointment I wear like skin. What you doing? My wife asks, finding my eyes closed and cross-legged on the couch. Shh, shh. I raise a palm, imagining myself covered in grease, wrenching under a hood that isn't mine, dollar signs floating in and out of frame. I was fundamentally broken as a kid. What made other kids see someone doing a job and think, I could do that, wasn't installed in me. Skills were what other people had, while I looked at them, mouth open, like an idiot. I'd love to think it was for the same reason we tell certain people not to rush to college, that I was figuring it out, playing the long game, but it wasn't. I was scared of what every man is scared of. Do you know what it is? Lean closer, I'll tell you. I was scared I wouldn't be any good. I'm in search and rescue. I spend inordinate amounts of time looking at maps. The word for this affliction is cartophile. By age 3, humans can correctly identify a map. There's an argument that using images to locate oneself in space is innate to our species. When someone can't, we say they're lost, and there are downright bizarre behaviors and symptoms associated. First, they panic, experiencing an overwhelming urgency to find something familiar, but failing to utilize available resources, such as maps and compasses, to do so. Instead, they wander in circles. If it's cold, they don't build a fire, even if equipped with the tools and know-how. Memory loss is next, events that just occurred being the first to go. And when a rescuer calls out, they rarely answer. Finding them is a disturbing experience. Based on looks, you'd think they'd been lost for months, when in reality, it's been less than 24 hours. A man I helped rescue once looked me in the eyes and asked, "Who am I?" And when I asked, "What?" he said, "Where am I?" There's a term for these symptoms. The term is disoriented. I lied. There was one occupation I saw as a kid and thought, I could do that. 3 Indiana Jones movies dropped in the 80s. In every one, there was an object, an amulet, a skull, an ark, and some idiot who couldn't wait to touch it and unleash its curses. I could be that guy, I thought. Indiana Jones idiot wasn't in the help wanted ads, though. So I continued, with no identity, no future to strive for. It was a geographical problem, I think. There's a line from Kurt Vonnegut about growing up in Indiana, how having nothing but horizon in all directions was enough to make a person religious. No wonder all my neighbors in Oklahoma eventually run to God. Try living an entire life with no goalposts to orient yourself to. Firmly grasping where you are, where you're going, is the most important but least recognized need of the human spirit. It's what is meant whenever we say rooted. By age 23, I had only ever lived in Oklahoma. I was godless, broke, and the only person to make me feel grounded was my older brother, who had just been arrested, facing trial for something he didn't do. He'd be convicted of this thing he didn't do, and all would go to shit. I'd leave the state 2 days afterward, and when I reached another state, I'd leave that one too. I was blind, running without a fear of death, but despite my efforts, something was imprinted in my soul, telling me if I moved in a specific, calculated way, even though odds were low, maybe I could make it. I would have looked hopeless had you cued Catholic hymns and zoomed in from above. A 23-year-old baby in a junker car, hood held down by a leather belt, $240 in the bank, heading for Alaska. But even if you caught me and brought me back to everything I'd ever known, I would have immediately headed right back for the mountains. The rules for the humans are: do not disturb or hold up the penguin. Stand still and let him go on his way. And here, he's heading off into the interior with 5,000 kilometers ahead of him. He's headed towards certain death. This week I read an article about the frill-fin goby. It's not a J.R.R. Tolkien character, if that's what you were thinking. It's a fish. It lives in the intertidal zone, a zone that sometimes looks like ocean, other times like land. When it looks like land, the goby lives in one of many saltwater pools that end up in a cup in the rocks when the tide moves out. Sometimes a predator comes along, or pool levels suggest time might be running out. So the goby launches itself like a fighter pilot from an ejector seat. It flies through the air, lands in another pool, and when it gets to the next pool, it jumps again. It can make up to 6 consecutive jumps before landing in open water, all from a mental map it made of the area when it looked like an ocean, before the tide went out. Stimming is a word used to describe certain autistic behaviors, things like rocking back and forth, repeating words or phrases, or spinning objects. They help stimulate a person or control their emotions whenever the world is shitting on them. I have a word for my ball game. I'm locating. I don't believe that penguin was doomed. I also don't think when I left for Alaska, I was gunning towards certain death. I was breaking a circle, the opposite of what most people do when they're lost. Habits bring us closer to who we are, or shove us further away from ourselves. Before we turn off the lights at night, my wife always asks, "Besito?" It means little kiss, and every time I think, here I am.
Thank you.
Yep.